When I'm drawing freehand in ink, no chance to erase anything at all, these are the sorts of marks I make, particularly at the start and when I'm positioning new things. Not just the marks I make, but the way I think to work out where to put them. Now I'm just working out eye level there, so I'm making a dot for my starting point, which is what I usually do. And there it is. I'm establishing this corner. Now, I'm not going to draw a straight line down here because that's not going to help me at all. I don't want a straight line. It's not a sharp edge. It's a compilation of lots of fairly rough, raggedy bits of stone. So I mark where I think the top and the bottom of that's going to be, and because I'm drawing it real size, actual size, I can just pop horizontally across. And now I place dots where I think the angle is going to be. Now I'm not positioning the end of that line, I'm just positioning the angle. So I'm taking care to put my dots what I think will be comfortably within the length of the wall. Because if possible, I'd rather have these marks covered in the final structure. A bit of muscle memory there. And now I do a row of dots so that I can see the angle more, just while I position all the others, because I can't firm that top gutter in place until I know where the end right-hand corner of the building is. So I do the same at the base. It's a bit tricky because there's a garden bed in front. So I try to allow for that. Now I've positioned eye level here, looking to see where is there a horizontal line across the stonework, and where that eye level hits that end wall on the right-hand side, that's actually the width of the building if we want to correct that camera distortion. And now I've worked out halfway down is this top line that follows the windows pretty much. The doorway is slightly less. So this is a perspective angle still. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm trying to establish angles without drawing lines, because lines won't suit, not straight lines, won't suit the effect I want at the end for this drawing to have. And if I put them in now, I can't do anything about them. So now I've got the corner, and I've looked at the width in from the corner where this first window is. I'm using a 0.3mm pen, which I think was a mistake. I probably should have used a 0.1. Looking back afterwards, it was just too thick for the amount of detail I was trying to put into a relatively small space. And it meant that what happened was the downstairs windows and door were slightly too large, which then compromised the proportions of the upstairs ones. So you notice I did a series of marks going across horizontally, across the width of this window, from the left to the right, which is where I'm just trying to position the different elements that I'm seeing within the window. Glass, timber beading, inset from the wall. You're watching this at double speed, so if you'd like to watch it at real speed, you can use the cog icon, and that will bring it back to actual speed, perhaps especially for the beginning part where I'm doing those first marks. And now I stick some detail in the window because I've got it worked out, so I might as well start to have some parts starting to look as though they're finished. And you see what I do? I go straight across horizontally to get a sense of the width. Now, if I were drawing this larger or smaller than the actual size in the photo, then I would still be doing this, but I would be making that adjustment in my head. And so all the time paying attention to perspective angles. And now, as I said, at eye level particularly, going across to see the relative widths of the spaces between the window to the door to the window to the corner. And I have a problem that I don't yet realize I have. That top right gutter actually angles down with that spot, angles down a bit too much. The angle's a bit too sharp. Not the mistake I normally make there. And now I messed this up. These bricks stood on end as a bit of a pseudo beam decorative effect. Simply made them too large on this window and angled up too high on the ones that I'm doing now. So too high, and that then, as I said, compromised the height of the rather tall window above, which looks as though it goes from seal into floor. And now doing something similar to the window on the other side. I didn't do any hatching on that inside door frame, I just realised, which I should have done. Now I'll work out where this corner is. There's nothing on this side wall except this buttress on the lower half that I couldn't really work out what was happening, so I left it out. But I worked out where that corner spot is, and you can see how I did that. I used the width of the left-hand wall compared to the width of the right-hand wall, which I've already drawn, and used that to estimate where that line coming down would be. I also aligned it with the corner and how it lined up with the windows. Now, I'm doing a fairly rough series of marks to represent the corners of these blocks of stone, which aren't exactly aligned, and so forth. So this angle at the top of the windows, I don't think works particularly well. So you can see me again putting dots, aligning with what I've drawn underneath where the widths are. But once I've drawn the dots, I still just look at those dots and visualize how the window's going to look in that spot before I put the sides in place, before I lock anything in place. And then I often do the sides, again, not going right to the bottom, and then I do the, if you like, the perspective angle aspect of it. So you can see that that left-hand window, which is in effect a door, should have come down more, which would have looked odd though, because those bricks stood on end above that bottom left window are too tall. Once we get one thing wrong, it starts to throw everything out. However, for the sake of this exercise, it's not a problem because I'm mainly working on my mark making. Now, with this window, you might have noticed that I had a light line down the left-hand side. I wanted to be able to capture in my drawing the effect of the irregular stonework that forms the corner, because I want to be able to emphasize the texture, the fact that the corners are rough, so I want to be able to do some heavier lines in parts. But in some ways at this point, this is just infill. You see me sliding the pen across from the reference to my drawing. This works just as well if you're on location. Instead of sliding the pen horizontally, we hold it up in front of our eyes at the angle of whatever bit of architecture we're looking at, and then bring it straight down vertically onto our paper. It sounds really rough and ready, but it's actually surprisingly easy to be fairly accurate with it. In fact, I think it's more accurate more easily than doing it horizontally in this way from a photo. And this is where I'm becoming really aware that something's not working properly in the upper story. I'm still thinking that it's probably mostly that the windows are too large instead of that angle being too sharp, too low down. I've let the overly thick pen line push out the size instead of taking that size off the, if you like, the interior of the window. I've let it push out onto the outsides of the window, but it still has an effect there as well. Choosing the best pen size for the size of the drawing we're doing and the amount of detail we're wanting to draw is significant. Now, positioning this chimney. It's all about keeping all my options open with the marks I use for the effect I want to create as late as possible in the drawing. Well, not so much as late as possible, but for the time I need to keep those options open. I need to see the angle. I might need to see where the roof or the wall or the corner is, but I'm not in a position yet to, if you like, do the final marks. It can take a little time to get used to not rushing with lots of straight lines with our pen really quickly at the start. They're just not helpful later on though. So I'm going to want to leave marks that can be disguised into the final drawing or just not noticed at all. That's partly why dots are so handy. They let us position angles as well as lines vertically, horizontally, and they give us a chance to visualize the objects drawn around them or at that angle or to that point, and to get a sense of, is that going to look right, or do I need to make some adjustments while I still can? So now I'm wanting to suggest this stonework. I don't want to start drawing every stone because that wouldn't be something that I can credibly do. It would overwhelm the building with black lines with black ink. But equally, these roughly hewn blocks of different stones, different colours and so forth, different shapes and sizes, visually they do create a fairly strong impression when we look at the photo. And so therefore, in my drawing, I want them to create a fairly strong impression without overwhelming. What you might do is compare how I render these stone blocks with what I do with the brick chimney at the very end. I do some marks also to represent the brick chimney, but they're a lot lighter. There's relatively less of them, and they don't draw attention so much, and yet we get a feel that there's bricks there, which is what I want. It's what I want here as well. Now, I don't intend to create the same effect on the left-hand side, because again, in life, what's the effect of the brickwork on the left-hand side? Well, it's not as obvious, the stonework, because it's been rendered in some way, which has reduced the amount of shadow being cast because some of the gaps in between those blocks are filled in, and it also, of course, makes it approximately the one colour, the one value. So I want to represent that as well. The important thing with this, if you like, stone effect, drawing the effect of the stonework, is that the perspective angles line up. And again, you'll see I'm doing kind of sometimes little straight lines, but they don't go very far on the perspective angle where the space between the blocks would be, the courses would be. But I just as often do a series of dots following that perspective angle, just enough to give me a sense of how I draw the lines for the blocks of stone on that course, that they keep the correct perspective angle, because that's what's going to look odd. That's what's going to stand out if it's not right. So I want to draw enough, but not too many of these blocks. And now I have to suggest the left-hand side. So I want to make it clear that we sort of can make out blocks here, but I don't want it to be nearly as strong as the front of the building, because I am trying to capture the effect of what we see, the visual effect, what appears prominent, what's not so prominent. Now, of course, I can choose to deliberately alter that. If I'd realised at this stage the angle was wrong on the roof, I could have lowered the gutter slightly on the left-hand side going towards the right corner, which would have made the perspective angle look more correct. But instead, I kept blaming the angle at the tops of the windows by mistake. Did you notice me draw that suggestion of brickwork on the chimney a moment ago? Just pushing this garden forward a little bit more, I think, there. And a little shrub just to get a bit of context, and push the corner of the building forward a bit. And we're done. And this is how I do it. It's all about giving myself marks that I can use to start to reference, to visualize with, to confirm angles, so that I keep as much ink off the paper until I'm ready to put it on, until I have enough information to put it in an accurate place. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. This is how I do it. This is what you see in my videos, perhaps sometimes a bit fast to work out exactly what's happened. So I hope you give it a go. I'll see you next time. Bye.